All right, everybody. So in the last session, what we have discussed is we discussed about the VNet peering and how you can connect multiple virtual networks with the one single hub. So what we have done is we have created three VNets, VNet 1, VNet 2, and VNet 3. And each VNet had a couple of machines connected, configured, and we managed VNet 1 as the hub and VNet 2 and VNet 3 as the spoke VNets. So which means VNet 2 can talk to VNet 3 with the help of VNet 1. So that is what we have discussed. Let me put that in a diagrammatic way so you can easily understand. So what we have implemented is, so we just consider, let's say this was the VNet 1. And we had other VNets too. So let's say VNet 2 here and VNet 3. And these have a subnet and they have the couple of virtual machines. And same thing here. Okay, it has subnets and couple of virtual machines. Of course, VNet 1 also had couple of machines here. One subnet, not one subnet, there are two subnets actually. Okay, and inside these subnets, we had a couple of machines here, but this one we didn't mention any VMs. Okay, so our goal was to reduce the VNet peering between the virtual networks. Okay, so what we used to do in general, if you want to communicate virtual machines from one VNet to another VNet, okay, we generally set up the VNet peering. We used to establish a peering between these two virtual networks. Like if you have multiple virtual networks, right, it's going to be a little difficult. Let's say you have another VNet here. So this two VNets again should connect to each other. You have another VNet here, and this should connect to each other. And this one should connect to each other. You see, right, there are like many, there will be a lot of confusion, and you might end up with the wrong configuration. You might see a lot of human errors. So to avoid these problems, in the enterprise, what we have done is, so we have come up with the one VNet. We are going to call it as a hub VNet. Okay, so what we have done is we established a peering between these two VNets and these two VNets. Okay, and here on the VNet 1, or we call it as a hub, right? What we have done is we implemented the VNet gateway. Okay, we implemented the virtual network gateway. All right, so this virtual network gateway had it was associated with the subnet. We call it as a gateway subnet. All right. So with this, what happens is this gateway, this VNet gateway act as a forwarder here in simple words, right? Generally it takes it does the encryption, okay? And it also ties to the bandwidth. The bandwidth depends on the number, the SKU version of your virtual network gateway. So the VM1, if this needs to talk to this one, right? The communication goes to the gateway, and from the gateway to this VM, it's going to be like this. So which means this VNet will only have a one peering, that is with the VNet 1. Even this VNet have only one peering, that is with the VNet 1. If you have introducing another VNet, let's say VNet 4 or 5, right? So that will again have a peering with this virtual network alone. So here we are reducing the number of peerings between the virtual networks. We are only pairing with the one virtual network, right? And if you look at this, right, even this is the best solution, but it also have some disadvantages. The disadvantages, if I say a couple of them, right? So you need to first of all spin up the virtual network gateway, which is in the first place, it's a bit expensive. And it has a dependency on the bandwidth and throughput, other stuff. And eventually this VNet 1, which we are calling as a hub VNet, these are the spoke VNets, right, which listen the traffic. So these hub VNet, eventually will have the multiple peerings. Let's say like 50 to 60 peerings, right? If you have multiple virtual networks, right? So though you are managing at one VNet, but it might have multiple, peerings. right? And in case if you want to establish a connectivity from on-premises or like express corporate network through point-to-site VPN or express route, so there are a lot of challenges in terms of managing your network infrastructure. So that's why Microsoft introduced a new concept called virtual WAN. So we say it's a VWAN. Okay, so VWAN, what happens is, I will explain you the scenario first. Okay, what you basically have to set up. It's a similar concept. Okay, you have to set up the one. It also works in a hub and spoke model. Okay, without hub and spoke models, we had a mesh networks where each VNet connect to each other through a peering. That's a complexity, we see, and we went to the hub and spoke with the one VNet as a hub and other VNet as a spoke. In the hub VNet, we set up the virtual network gateway, and we see challenges because virtual network gateway is costing you more, and it has a throughput and bandwidth issues. Now we are going with another solution. The solution which we are what we're going to say is virtual WAN. So what we do is in the virtual WAN, let's say this is virtual WAN. Okay. Let's say this is your virtual WAN. Okay, this is the vWAN. This is going to be your virtual WAN. And let's say you have VNet 1. Okay, and this is in, let's say, east-west location. And you have a VNet 2. Okay, this is in a central US location. You have a VNet 3. This is in Europe West Europe location. Like you have another VNet, let's say VNet 4. Okay, this is in the location, let's say Central India. Okay, like it's you have VNets in different geographical location, and your VMs are connecting each other, right? So what we are doing is, the goal is to connect all the machines of each VNet. Let's say a VM in this network should talk to this one, maybe this one should talk to this one. So there are like a couple of use cases, right? So without this, we see a lot of challenges with the hub and spoke model. What we want to implement here is, okay, we want to implement a centralized management of your routing for your virtual machines or virtual networks, centralized routing mechanism. Okay, and it also should give me an opportunity to connect from on premises. Okay, let's say if you have an on-premises site-to-site VPN, let's say point-to-site VPN, you have an express route, and you want to implement the firewall in your network infrastructure. And the firewall, you create policies, centralized policies that has to apply for all the virtual networks in your environment. It's like global policies. If you want to implement such features, you can incorporate with the virtual WAN. So the first thing is easy routing method, and the other one is you can incorporate connectivity between the on-premises world, and you can also create incorporate the firewalls and its policies. You can define the custom routes, various options you have with the virtual WAN. Here you don't need to set up any virtual network gateway or VPN gateway here. So everything will be taken care in the back end. So what you need to do is you have to create a virtual hubs. Let's say I'm creating a vHub. Okay, in this virtual WAN, I'm going to create a vHub. Let's say this is for the east-west location, and there is one more I'm creating. This is like say central US. There is one more I'm creating for EUW. Okay, so I can create one more for Central India, but I can add these VNets to the existing vHub, this vHub, and this one to here, this one to here. So what happens is all these vHubs are connected to this virtual WAN. Okay, so and these VNets definitely have a subnets, and each subnet have virtual machines on all those things, right? You'll have your virtual machines like this. Okay, so like each VNet will have a VNet and VMs and subnets, many things, right? Now what you can do is, if this VM want to talk to let's say this virtual machine, one of the virtual machine in this VNet, right? The traffic goes to the it will initially check, the destination, right, whether it is exist in the same VNet or not. If it does not exist, then the request might go to the vhub. Okay, the vhub contains the multiple virtual networks, VNet 3 and other VNets with right, could be in the same region, or it's all depends on your business requirement. It might contain the multiple virtual networks. So it does the the vhub tries to identify the destination within its network. If it is not there, the default route goes back to the VWAN, or I would say it will try to advertise the routes to the all vhubs and try to learn where is this destination IP address exist. So since it has all are connected together, the request might goes to EUS, and if EUS has a destination, it will respond. Otherwise, it goes to the central US, and central US has one of the VNet and it has the destination IP address, and it will respond, okay, here is the IP address, then the connectivity is established like this, right? So here again, when you add your VNet to this vhub, there will be a peering automatically established to this vhub. Okay, whatever the number of VNets you are adding to this vhub, there'll be the peering will be established. If you are adding another VNet to this vhub, that will have a peering established. So you are not going to establish a peering between these VNets. Okay, you are not going to establish any peering between these VNets. The peering is established with your vhubs here. Okay, we say virtual hubs. The peering is established to your vhubs, and they can talk to other machines based on this. In case if you think this is like very restricted environment, okay, I don't want any traffic from this entire Azure network infrastructure, right? I don't want any traffic to reach to this. You can create the custom routes. Whatever we just explained or navigated the route path, right? That's a default route. In case if you wanted to restrict the routing, you have the static routings, okay? Or maybe you can create a route table, and in the route table you can specify how you want to route the traffic, right? You want to restrict the traffic, you can also integrate, you can also incorporate the Azure firewall, or you can also incorporate your network virtual appliance, your own network virtual appliance. What happens is, let's say if this one of the VM within this VNet want to talk to this virtual machine, right? So by default, it's any to any, it's allowed, right? If you want to restrict the access, what you can do is you can create a route table, okay, and associate with the all the vhubs, or right. So whenever there is a request coming to this VM or this address space, this VNet address space, you can route the request to the firewall. In the firewall, you can restrict the access. Okay, so such kind of configuration also possible, so that you can restrict the access to specific networks, a specific subnet, or specific set of the virtual machines as well. And with the Azure firewall is being introduced, or network virtual appliance is being introduced, you can control the inbound traffic, outbound traffic, like allowing a certain URLs, or certain IP address you want to allow or deny. Such kind of policies you are going to implement it. And moreover, right, you can configure the point-to-site VPN. If you go back to my previous sessions, we spent a good amount of time to configure the point-to-site VPN. And in the point-to-site configuration, we use certificate-based authentication. So here also you can use certificates-based authentication. You can use Azure AD-based authentication. If you have your on-premises Radius server, you can also use Radius server authentication. There are many authentication methods. I mean, out of these three, you can use any one of them. Okay, and the good thing here is, you establish a connectivity um, from your on-premises device to one of the vHub. Okay, let's say you connected to this. You configure the point-to-site VPN with this vHub, and you're going with the default routing. And from your user system, right? From your user system, when they connect to the VPN, they can connect to any network within this VWAN, unless you have a restrictions like this. right? Otherwise, the user can talk to any other machine within the cloud environment. So that's a good thing, without establishing multi-peerings, right? You are able to connect to this. Okay, so what we are going to do is today, I have done entire setup. Okay, I've done with the setup because the VHub itself, this VHub creation itself takes minimum 30 minutes. Okay, so that's why I've done with the setup, and I'm going to walk you through each and every step, how you configure, what is the first step you have to do, what is second step, like till the end-to-end setup. So the end-to-end setup, what I'm going to show you is I'm going to connect my laptop to Azure VWAN VPN. Once I connect to the VPN, I will be able to talk to any one of the virtual machines in different VNets. That's the end goal here. Okay, so that whenever somebody join your organization, you are going to install a VPN in their system, and they'll just connect. They will use their user ID password to connect to VPN, and they'll be able to log into the any server that they want to access. Okay, so that's a lab I'm going to show you, and this is the in general, the some architecture what you also see in the enterprise environments. There could be some additional components that they might have is they might have site-to-site VPN or express route connectivity. Site-to-site VPN they might use, if they want to, if you have users who goes to corporate office, and there they will try to connect to your Azure workloads, there they might use site-to-site VPN. So there could be scenarios where you see express route as well. So express route scenarios basically we use if you have any data trans migration, right? So because the reason why we go to express route is you will get more network bandwidth, and it takes very less time to for the data transfer. The communication will not go over the internet, but it is a bit expensive. So if you don't have any such bandwidth requirements, then you don't prefer to go for express route. There could be various other use cases as well. Business to business it might vary, but if you want to use site-to-site VPN, you can connect and connect to these resources. You can establish it. Okay. So otherwise, the user will have a point-to-site VPN configured, and they will try to connect to the VPN. And once they connected, they can use their Azure AD credentials and try to connect to any mission that they want to try connect. So the steps are very simple. But just pay a little bit attention here. It might give you a lot of confusion. Okay. So first of all, what we need is we need to set up the environment. To set up the environment, let me give you the steps. Okay, so what we will do is we will prepare the environment first. As part of the preparation, what we will do is we'll have to set up the virtual networks. Okay, I'm going to set up 3 virtual networks. Maybe I would say I already set up these 3 virtual networks, which means I have the virtual machines from East US location. I have the virtual machine from West Europe. I have the virtual machine from the Central India location. Okay, I have 3 virtual networks. I am not connecting these 3 VNets now. Eventually, the VMs part of VNet 1 should talk to VNet 3 and VNet 2, and same like vice versa. Let's say if VNet 2 talk to VNet 1 and VNet 3. Like if you want to establish, like it's going to be mesh network, right? Mesh topology. So I don't want to do that, but eventually the goal is to they should be able to talk to each other. And my another goal is to I have my system, my laptop, and from my laptop, I should be also connecting to these machines. That's the end goal. Okay. So we have to set up this, and at least I'm going to set up 1 VM in each network. Okay. 1 VM in each network. Okay, so that is for testing, but in the enterprise you might see multiple VMs within the east-west location. You might have multiple VNets, and each VNet might have multiple subnets, and each subnet might have multiple virtual machines too. Okay, so this is to give you some overall idea for how the setup looks like. Just don't think that you will only have 1 VM or 2 VMs. You will have the VMs with the multiple count. Okay, so the next thing is that to establish a connectivity, what we need to do is we need to set up the virtual WAN. Okay, we have to create a virtual WAN. Okay, once you create a virtual WAN, as you know, right, we have to set up the virtual hubs. Create a vHubs. So once you create a VHub, okay, then you have to create a point to site configuration, because we need to connect from on premises, right? Point to site configuration. So the point to site configuration has couple of steps. The first step is, what is the VPN tunnel you want to choose it? VPN tunnel. The VPN tunnel, we have to choose, because we are going to use Azure AD authentication. So we have to say open VPN. So that's a VPN tunnel we have to choose. We can also choose IK version 1 or the other VPN methods. And for this VPN tunnel, as I mentioned, the supported authentication is Azure AD based authentication, and it also supports the radius and certificate based authentication. So in this case, to look at the future, right? I mean, we don't want to create certificate all the time, or we don't want to struggle with these issues with the certificates. It's not working, it's not imported properly. Those kind of issues, if you want to avoid, let's go with the Azure AD based authentication. Okay, so once you select the Azure AD, so there are a couple of things that you have to do it within Azure AD. So what you need to do is, you have to provide the Azure AD information while configuring this VPN. This is all the steps that you see when you select to configure the point to set VPN. It will ask you to select the VPN tunnel type. Then it will ask you to select the authentication type. When you select the authentication, obviously you have to provide the Azure AD information, right? When you select Azure AD as authentication method, you have to specify Azure AD, ID. Okay, what is your directory ID? And later, you have to provide the authentication URL. Okay, so a couple of information, some information you have to provide. So just to configure, let your VPN tunnel know, okay, this is my Azure AD tenant, and go ahead and try to authenticate with that Azure AD. That's my identity provider. Okay, so once you provide all these things, then you will have an option to create the point to site configuration. You are going to create the configuration, create the P2S configuration. Once you create the configuration, it takes like, let's say, 5 to 10 minutes or 15 minutes time it will take. Later, the next step is to, uh, associate. Okay, let's not go with associate. Now what we have done is, we created an environment, we created a VWAN, we created a VHub. Now we are creating a point to site configuration, right? So once you have the point to site configuration in place, how user need to connect to the VPN, connect to the network? There should be some VPN software, right? So we have to configure the VPN application. Since it is Azure AD based authentication, right? So in Azure AD, you have enterprise applications. Okay, in the enterprise application, I would say applications here. In the application, you have an option called Azure VPN. Okay, Azure VPN is the application that you have to add this application to your Azure AD. Okay, after you add, then what you need to do is, you have to download this Azure VPN software into your system. Okay, so download Azure VPN software into your system. So once you're done with this, you're almost ready. Okay, you're almost ready with the configure. One last step, what you are going to do is, you created this point to site configuration. Okay, and you registered the Azure VPN application, and you download the Azure VPN, right? This configuration has to be associated with the virtual hub that you created. Okay, and so that's another, you associate this hub with this configuration with your hub. When you associate it, right, what happens is, it will give you an option to download the configuration. Okay, P2S configuration. This configuration, when you download it, right, so what you need to do is, you have downloaded the VPN client, you download the configuration, you install the VPN client. Okay, once you install it, okay, open the client and import the P2S configuration file. Okay, you have to import this into your Azure VPN application. When you import, you will be able to connect. You will have an option to connect. When you connect, it will ask you for the user ID password. The user ID password is the ID and password of your Azure AD. Okay, the user ID password which you got created, which you created, right? And which has given to you. So you have to provide those user ID credentials. Then it will be able to establish a connection. Okay, so these are the steps you have to follow if you want to establish the communication. And this one, right, this entire setup, right, it's a one-time activity, guys. You know, so you, because we are doing this lab, just assume that this setup will be done when your organization is decide to move to the cloud, right? Or maybe when they have decided to establish a communication from the on-premises, or maybe when they decide to establish a secure connection between the virtual networks, right? It's like a one-time activity. When they do the landing zone assessment, when they do the landing zone configuration, that's when they decide, okay, this is the architecture we have to follow. Then the consultant or Azure AD L2 or L2 plus engineer, L3 engineer is, I mean, Azure admin L2 or L3 plus engineer is going to implement this. Okay, so next time if you want to any user to connect to this Azure network, what they need to do is they need to download the Azure VPN, and they have to configure this file. This will be usually done by your Azure OS team, the IT team. When they try to configure application and laptop, they will be able to configure all these things in advance. Okay, so this can also be done through a group policy or SCCM or various other tools. The user just need to launch the application that was installed automatically. Then you just need to connect to the application for the next, whenever the new user try to connect to this, right? They just need to do this. And again, who need to access to this application and a VPN? Is like everybody in your organization can connect to this Azure environment, or only few specific people? So that also you have an option. When you're configuring the point-to-site VPN, right, there is an option who need to get access to this VPN. Is it like only set of people? Let's say you have application team, and you have the cloud support team, like you guys, right? You only these two guys, right, need to have access. So for them you are going to give access in the Azure point to site configuration. So though it is installed to all the users, when they try to authenticate, they will get an error saying that you are not authorized to connect to this VPN, or there's some issue with this, right? So that's what you see it. So that's about the connectivity from on-premises to Azure, and within the Azure between the multiple virtual networks, how you connect. And these VNets can be in the same subscription, a different subscription, different region. So it's not necessary like, they have to be part of the same subscription or same location. Okay. So let me just walk you through first step by step what I've done it. So you'll get some clarity here. Okay. All right, so I'm going to the Azure portal. So first of all, I'm going to show you the environment which I've created. So here you can see there are 4 virtual machines that are running, but I'm going to consider only 3 virtual machines here. So you can see one virtual machine is in East US, the other one is in West Europe location, the other one is in a Central India location. Okay, and they all are part of the different virtual network. Let me just show you this edit columns. And I'm going to say virtual network. Do you see virtual network option here somewhere? Yeah, it is here. Okay, I'm going to move this up a little bit and save this. Now you can see they all are different VNets. The first one, VNet 1, VM is the part of VNet 1, VNet, and this is the VNet 2, and this is VNet 3. They are different locations. Okay, now if I go back to the virtual networks, and VNet 1 VM, VNet, that's a first one. If I go to the pairings, it is paired with the our virtual hub or a VWAN hub. Same thing with this one. Okay. This is something I tried testing with the VNet 2 to VNet 4. I can just quickly remove this. It's not required, just to avoid a confusion. Okay. So what I'm trying to say, you only have one pairing, and that pairing is with the virtual WAN. If I go to the VNet 3, you have the same thing. If I click on this, right, you will see where it is paired. It is paired with the virtual WAN. Okay, now is it clear now? If I go back to the diagram, okay, so what I have mentioned is, so all these VNets are paired with this VWANs, VHubs actually, VHubs I would say. Okay, they are paired with this VHubs. Now I will go to the virtual WAN, and I believe you all know how to create these virtual machines. And while creating virtual machine itself, you will be able to choose the virtual network. So nothing to worry about this VNets, how we create and all, right? Now I will go back to the virtual WANs. So go to the virtual WAN. I go to the virtual WAN as part of our activity. So we are done with this environment setup. Now what we are going to do is we are going to learn how to create the virtual WAN. To create the virtual WAN, just click on create here and provide the name and resource group and the subscription and location. There's two different tiers, standard and basic. So the difference between these two will be the features that they offer. Okay, so there's a difference, but you always go for the standard one. Okay, when you click on review and create, it will create a virtual WAN. Once the virtual WAN is created, you will see like this. So I've created a virtual WAN with the name called production-vwan, prod-vwan. Okay, so as I mentioned, the virtual WAN contains the vHubs, virtual hubs, and you have the VPN sites, which is nothing but your site-to-site VPN. You have the user VPN configuration. This is nothing but your point-to-site configuration. And you have express route. This is the express route connectivity from your on premises. And you see the virtual network connection. This is where you are going to add your VNets to your vHubs. Okay. And if I go to the vHubs, okay, I have two vHubs I've created, and so you can see East US hub, and this naming standard says West Europe. Okay, and here for the East US you can see Pine to site VPN is set up, but express route and VPN site like site to site is empty. There's nothing here. There's nothing here. Okay, but for this one I established the Pine to site VPN. So if I go back to the diagram, okay, so what I'll just create a diagram with the another one, so it will be easy to understand, right? So I'm going to say this is the VWAN, and here I have the two vHubs, East US vHub, and I have another one, West Europe EUW, and it's another vHub, and I have a VNets here. Okay, I have a VNet one, and there's another one, there's one more. Okay, these are the different VNets. Okay, and let's say this is in a East US VNet, and this is the West Europe VNet, EUW VNet, and this one what I have is a Central India. Okay, VNet. All right, so I have a user who's trying to connect to this virtual the cloud environment as well. Okay, so this is my this is the VWAN setup here. Okay, and these are the two vHubs what I have, and I have these two vHubs connected to the VWAN. So now what I have done is I have added the US VNet to this VHub, and Europe West VNet and Central India VNet to this VHub. Okay, I've added, which means automatically this VNet has appearing with this VHub, and this one has appearing with this one. Likewise, the East US VNet also have the peering. Okay, and I will show you how to create the VHub first. Okay, and how you can associate this VNet with your VHub. So going back to this virtual WAN, and I'm going to create a new hub. This is called VHub. So select the region. The region can be anything, so nothing to worry about this. But it's better to choose the location where you are going to use this VHub to connect your virtual networks. So let's say you're going to connect your virtual networks from Central US location. Let's choose the Central US as an example, right? anything, it's up to you. Business require, provide the name of your vhub. I'm going to say CEO's vhub example, right? And your vhub should have the IP address range. This IP address range should not be conflicting to the existing virtual network address spaces, and in your on-premises site to site and point to site VPNs address spaces. So this should be unique one. I'm going to say 30 dot, just giving an example. Okay, it's not 10.21.0.0. It's not working. 10.21.0.0/16. I'm just taking one, and we have capacity, like, depends on number of VMs that are connecting. You can specify the we have capacity, right? Say 2000 VMs. So for now we're just connecting to one or two machines, right? We're choosing that. The routing preference, I go with the as path. It's up to you, whether traffic is coming from the VPN, like site to site, or a point to site VPN or express route. If the traffic is coming from the express route, you might choose this express route as a routing preference. But I go with the as path. Basically, it takes a very least path to route the traffic. So if you are going to use this bhub to connect to your on-premises network, you have to choose yes, and you are going to specify the gateway scale unit and select it. So right now I don't have any site set VPN because I don't have the corporate environment. So if you want to set up the point to site configuration, you can say yes, and this is where you are going to specify this units, and so you have to configure it. So many other things. This we can do it later. Okay, I'm going to say no for now. Okay, so what you can do is, once you configure it, you will be able to see the configuration here, the VPN configuration. You will see all of them. See, you see VPN point to site server configuration, you see already available, right? So because I created already, so right now I'm going to say no for now to avoid any confusion. I'm going to say no here as well. I'm going to create it. So here I'm going with all default option. What information I've specified and that is mandatory is region, name of your vhub, capacity, and what is the hub private address space, and what is the routing preference. The remaining things are optional. It's like if you want to connect from on-premises, you have to select site to site, point to site, or express route. Otherwise, you can just create this vhub and you can connect your virtual networks within the cloud environment. It's not mandatory options, but in our example, I'm choosing point to site VPN later, so that I can connect from my laptop to entire cloud environment. Okay, so I have already created. So because when you click on create, it takes 30 minutes approximately, right? It says 30 minutes is clearly giving the information, right? It's as like simple as your virtual network gateway only, VPN gateway. So here I already have one. I'm going to show you this. Okay, if I click on edit, or let's say if I talk about the properties of this vhub, once you create a virtual hub, it will show like this. It will show the status as provisioned. Sometimes what happens is you see the virtual hub is created and you think it is created within 5-10 minutes. But when you go inside it, you will see the routing status. It is saying updating or in progress kind of status. It should be provisioned, then only you can confirm that virtual hub is created. Okay, I myself confused many times. Okay, the virtual hub is created, let me go ahead and make other changes, but when I was doing the changes, it was giving an error. The virtual hub is still in a progress, the creation is in progress. Then I realized, okay, this is an updating status. Okay, so then what I've done is the next thing, once a virtual hub is created, we need to associate our virtual network. That is what we have to do, right? So in this case, the virtual hub is created. I'm going to associate my VNet with the virtual hub. To do that, okay, you don't need to come here. What you can do is you go back to your virtual WAN. There is a virtual network connections option. Okay, so here you will be able to see the connections, virtual networks, which are already added to the vhubs. You can click on add connection. That's when you will see an option to add an existing virtual network to the existing virtual hubs. I will show you in a moment. So usually this VWAN, right? This usually takes a lot of time to load many properties. Even if you add or modify any property in the VWAN, it takes some time. So sometimes it takes 15 minutes, sometimes it takes 20 minutes as well. So if I want to add any new virtual network to the vHubs, let's say in this example, I have another VNet example, right? Which I want to add to this one. So what I need to do is I just need to click on add connection. Okay, provide the connection, let's say VNet 4, okay, to vHub Europe, right? Let's say Europe West. So here you are going to specify the vHub, which vHub. I have two vHubs I've created, right? You see US hub and West Europe hub. I'm going to choose West Europe hub and select the resource group where your virtual network is exist. So mine is existing in the, I think, West Europe RG, West US RG, and you see VNet 4 is available. And you can say propagate to none. I mean, this one, like the route configuration, if you say none, so the route will not be propagated. So it has to be propagated. If you have a custom route table, you can specify, but default route table can be used. So if you want to propagate the route table, specify the which route table you want to propagate. This is like how the routing has to happen. This is where you are going to control your routing. So by default, the default route, what it does is it communicate to all the virtual machines or virtual networks which are connected to the vHubs, and those vHubs are part of this VWAN. Okay, I'm going to select this, and if you want to specify any static routes, let's say all the traffic, okay, should goes to a virtual appliance. So if let's say if I'm trying to connect to the internet, let's say 0.0.0/0, this is the internet traffic, okay, internet route. So for this connectivity, any traffic going to the internet, I want the traffic to go to my virtual appliance. Let's say 10.0.0.5. If you think your virtual appliance or a firewall IP address is 0, this one you're going to specify any traffic that is going out to the internet will be routed to this virtual appliance. That's what you're going to specify. So right now I'm not going to select anything. I'm going to click on create this. So I have 3 virtual networks which are already added. Okay, 1 to the East US and 2 for the West Europe. Now I'm adding the another one, okay, to the West Europe vHub. This is how you add your virtual networks to the existing vHubs. Okay, so the next step, now what we have done is we have added the virtual networks, right? The next thing is, okay, the next thing what we do is we have to configure the point-to-site VPN, right? To configure the point-to-site VPN, you can go to use VPN configuration option. And before we go to the use VPN configuration option, I will just quickly show you the vHub properties. Okay, I'll go back to the virtual hub and edit the virtual hub. Or before I edit the virtual hub, you can see for this virtual hub, how many virtual networks connected? Only one virtual network I have connected as per our diagram, right? Only one virtual network is connected. Then VPN side to side, we have enabled it, but we don't have any traffic coming. And user VPN point to site VPN, I have one customer, that's my laptop, which is connected at the moment. Okay. And you can see the properties. We have Azure Firewall, any virtual appliance like firewall appliance or express route connected. You can see them, the status, how many of them are connected to this vHub. Okay. Then the routing, as I mentioned, right? If you want to create a custom routes, you can come here and create a new route table or modify the default route as well, route table as well. So if I go back to the default route, you can add a new routes here, and based on this route configuration, it will be routing the traffic. Okay, so that's about the route table. If you want to check the effective routes associated with this vHub, you will get all the effective routes, like how the traffic is routing to the other destination or other IP addresses. Okay, so if it is not showing up here, you can actually download this to download this. So you will get more routes. So by default, there is a limitation, only 100 effective routes can be displayed in this Azure portal. And sometimes if there is an issue with the, browser or anything, it might see problem. That's why I always recommend to go for download, and you can download a CSV file and you can start monitoring from there. So there were situations what happens, when there is a critical issue occurred, you don't know how the traffic is going on. So you come here and check, okay, so any traffic for this address space, the traffic should be routed to the vhub. Okay, so this is what we see, but there could be some other route that you are not able to see here. It's not showing up in this page because some issue with the browser or some issue with something else. That's why I always download this into a CSV Excel sheet, then start reviewing from there. The same information you see in the Excel sheet, but you might see some of them which are not showing up here. Okay, so that's what we do it. So this is like, any communication. This is like a point to set VPN configuration that you specify, that we will specify soon, right? So how the communication has to go and the routing path. Okay, this is specific to one virtual hub. Okay, so now if I click on edit virtual hub, so this is where I can specify if I want to change the capacity, if I want to change the routing preferences, and the gateway scale units and all, we can just make it. So this is the place again, if you want to associate a VPN configuration with your vhub, this is the place we come and make changes. Okay, we will come back to this and I will show you this again. So right now you already see I'm including the point to site configuration, and you see the configuration also available. Okay, so this is just to give you some overview about the virtual hubs. Okay, now just to again summarize, just to ensure that you are on the track. Okay, what we have done is we have the large infrastructure in the cloud. Okay, just assume, and you have many virtual networks and many workloads that are running in the cloud environment, and you're finding difficulty with the routing. Whenever there is a critical issue occur, communication issue occur, connectivity issue occur, you're not able to identify where exactly the problem is occurring. That's why your organization is decide to go for the centralized solution where the routing and the communication can be monitored, controlled from one single place. So that's why virtual WAN is introduced, and your architects have designed a solution. Okay, let's create a virtual hub for each location, and whatever the virtual networks part of that location, let's add them to this each location specific virtual hubs. Okay, and let's design the routing configuration, how the traffic has to be routed based on the workloads that are running inside the virtual networks. Okay, they will define it, and accordingly you will be able to configure the vhubs, and when there's a request come, they will be automatically specified what configuration you have to specify and all. So you don't need to worry about what should I select, the routing preference and all those things. Your network architect, solution architect will be able to provide you the details, and you'll be able to implement it. Okay, now what we have done, we have created vhubs and added our virtual networks to this vhubs, and we are going with the default routes. We are not introducing any network appliances, we are not introducing any firewall appliances, we are not introducing any new routing configurations. It's a default, everything is default. Now if I connect to any one of the machine, okay, let's say if I take RDP to one VM in this VNet and try to connect to the another VM here, they can talk to each other. Okay, there won't be any problem because we are done with the cloud configuration. Okay, point to set VPN is an optional thing. You want to implement or you don't want to implement, you can ignore it. If you want to establish a connectivity between multiple virtual machines in the VNets, create a VWAN, create a vhubs, add your VNets to that vhubs. That's all. The VMs can talk to each other, whichever the VMs or VNets connected to the same VWAN, okay, of vhubs. All right, so that's how you do it. Now what we do is we have to set up the point to set VPN. I'm going to create the point to set configuration. I'm not specifying here, I'm going to specify here, create the point to site configuration. Okay, so while creating point to site configuration, I'm going to choose Open VPN as a tunnel type. There are tunnel type. The tunnel will actually encrypt the data and encapsulate the data. When the data transmission is happening over the internet to the cloud environment. Okay, so now if I go back to the Azure portal and go to the virtual WAN, okay, and go to the use VPN configuration. Okay, so here what I need to do is I have to click on create user VPN configuration. It's taking time to load. This is the one which I already set up. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on create user VPN configuration just to show you the options. Okay. So the option what I mentioned while I was talking, when you click on create a new user VPN configuration, you have to provide the name. Let's say this is a P2S VPN. Okay. 02 P2S VPN 2. And the tunnel type I mentioned, OpenVPN. For this kind of, VPN tunnel, Azure AD authentication has to be chosen. Okay, when I say yes here, this is where you are going to specify audience, issuer, and AD tenant. The audience are nothing but your Azure AD directory ID, and issuer is nothing but, I will show you that. The format for the issuer will be like this. Okay, and this is where you're going to provide your Azure AD tenant as well. So the format will be like this, and this is where you're going to specify your Azure AD tenant ID. Okay, so now what we need to do is we have to know how to fetch this information. If I go back to my Azure portal, another tab, I'm looking for Azure Active Directory. So you have Azure AD here. And within Azure AD, you have something called properties here. If I go to the properties, you have a tenant ID. Tenant ID is nothing but your Azure Active Directory ID. Okay, you have to replace this here. So if I go here, just paste it here, and here just replace your Azure AD this way. And here again, you have to replace this one. Okay. So when you're done with the update, just click on create. But in case if you want to restrict the VPN configuration to a specific set of users, this is where you're going to enable user groups. And the user groups, you're going to specify the group details, and the users who are part of those groups will be able to access this point-to-site VPN configuration. Otherwise, it will be set to all the users. Right now, I'm not going to specify any groups just to avoid any further confusions. So once you're done with this, just click on review and create. It's going to create the VPN configuration. Once you create the VPN configuration, it will absolutely it will show like this. Okay, the VPN configuration name you have given and the address pool you have given, all those things you have given. I can just click on edit configuration just to show you the options. Same thing what I've done is here, Azure AD, and click on create. It's created. Okay, then later what I've done is I have associated this with the virtual hub. Okay, when I'm creating this VPN configuration, if you have noticed, I've never specified my virtual hub details, right? I've not specified the virtual hub details. I just created the configuration by letting this configuration know that you have to use the OpenVPN and you have to use the Azure AD credentials. And in Azure AD, you have to go to my Azure AD directory and authenticate. Okay. In case if you want to create specify the user groups, you can specify, otherwise you can ignore it. So once you create the VPN configuration, what you need to do is you have to associate this configuration with your virtual hub. To do that, go to the hubs, click on your hub, edit the virtual hub again, and this is where you're going to specify include the VPN gateway for VPN sites and include the point-to-site gateway. So this is where you're going to specify this scale units. And here also you are going to specify the scale unit, but here you are going to specify the VPN configuration. Your VPN configurations will be showing up here. Like if you have more than one VPN configuration, it will be showing up here. You have to choose the right one. Okay, once you choose the right one, there is a configure option. So this is where you see the user group is set to all users. In case if you have a specific user groups, you can specify that here. But this user groups need to be specified the address pool. So based on this address pool, they will get a IP address when they connect to the VPN. Otherwise, if you specify multiple groups, for each group, you are going to specify the address pool, and for those respective group members will get a IP address from the address pool that you're specifying here. I'm specifying only this one, and this will be applicable to all the users. Whoever the users connect into the VPN, they will be able to get this IP address. Okay, now I'm done with the configuration. Okay, now you guys, if you understand properly, okay, just to add a little bit more here, what I've done is I've created a point to set configuration with open VPN tunnel, then AAD as an authentication method. Okay, and here I specified what is the AAD ID and couple of URLs. Okay, then I have associated, let me say associate VPN config with the vHub. Okay, in this case what I've done is I have associated this vHub with the this configuration with the East2S vHub. Okay, this is what I've done it. So once you do this, okay, once you do this, what happens is, if I go back to the once you confirm this, once you confirm, it will take up to 30 minutes to save the configuration. And later what you need to do is you need to go back to your VPN configuration. You will have an option to download the VWAN user VPN profile. Okay, you will have an option to download the VWAN user VPN profile. So when you download it, if I click on this, you see it is highlighted. When I download this, so there is a file that gets downloaded. I will show you that here. Okay, so if I go to the downloads, you see the P2S VPN. In this, you have a Azure VPN. That's where you see the VPN config.xml file. This is the configuration file. This file will be imported into your VPN application. Now, so if I go back to this, once you associate, after you associate, you will download the, okay, you will be able to download the VPN configuration. Once you download the VPN configuration, the next step is download the or register VPN application. Okay, guys, this is different. Okay, the VPN configuration is different, VPN application is different with the AAD, your Azure AD. That's the first thing. Okay, later download VPN client from Microsoft Store into the user system. Once you download, import the configuration, import the VPN config into the user system. That's what you're supposed to do it. And we download the VPN configuration that will be imported into my user system. Okay, so I will show you how to first I just show you how to download the VPN configuration. Now I will show you how to register the VPN application with the AAD. So there is a URL that you have to use it. So the URL is, if I go back to the documentation, so this is the documentation, guys. Grant consent to Azure VPN app registration. This is the public Azure URL. You have to use it. When you put this in the browser, it will ask you to authenticate. When you authenticate with your global admin credentials, then the VPN application will be showing up in the enterprise applications. So if I go back to my Azure AD, okay, if I go back to Azure AD, it's my Azure AD portal. Okay, and I go to the Azure Active Directory, and here you can see enterprise applications. In the enterprise application, you can see Azure VPN already showing up here, right? So I use that URL that you see from the documentation. When I accept the consent, and I am able to see this here. The next thing is I have to download the VPN client. To download the VPN client, the same documentation will actually have the steps, but I'm going to show here. This is the place where you are going to download the VPN client. The documentation will have the steps or a URL for downloading this VPN client. Once you download this VPN client, the next step is what? We have to import the XML file. So once you download the VPN client, so this is how it's gonna show when you launch it. This is how it will show up, and later you have an option to import file. When I say import, I'm going to specify my configuration and click on open. When I open this, right, this is the stage where it is going to authenticate, ask for the authentication. This is where the first time the user have to provide his user ID password to authenticate with the VPN. When you provide it, that's where the VPN configuration added to your user system. So once it is added, you will see an option like this. You will see your VPN details here. You just need to click on connect. When I click on connect, it's going to authenticate with the Azure ID, and it's going to say connected or disconnected or any errors. You can see these are the routes. It has it. These are like, your VNets. This is the first one. What you see is, 10.20.0.0.0, right? That's a VHub address space which I've given. I will show you that. If I go back to the, if I go to the, where is that document? Okay, it's very slow here. If I go to the virtual WAN vHubs, right? You can see the address space of my vHub. This is where my VPN configuration is set, right? You can see here. Okay, that's a VHub IP address range, and you see 0.0./16 is for the VNet 1, the other one is for the VNet 2, this one is for VNet 3, this is for the VNet 4, and the other ones what you see is the client address pool what I have given while configuring the VPN configuration, right? So that's from that client configuration, IP configuration, I got this IP address to my system, and it is successfully authenticated. Now I should be able to connect to, okay, if I go back to this one, now my user, I'm connected to this VWAN, all right, and to be precise to this VHub, all right, now I should be able to connect to any VM in this VNet or in this VNet and in this one as well. There's one more VNet which we associated in that VNet also. All right, so I can connect to any machines using the private IP address without public IP address, without 338 and port is being allowed in the NSG rules. So if I go back to the Azure portal, I will show you my virtual machines. I'm going to the virtual machines. There are 4 virtual machines. The virtual machine 1 doesn't have the public IP address. And even if I go to the NSGs, there is no 338 port allowed. And same thing with this machine, VNet 2 as well. There's no public IP, no RDP port allowed. All right. Likewise, all of this you have it. So let me see if I can connect to this machine through RDP using the private IP address. Okay. And just to repeat again, I am able to connect to the VPN. Okay. Now what I will do is I will try to take RDP to the one of the virtual machine. So you see it's asking for the credentials, which means the connectivity is established. I'm able to connect to the virtual machines. Okay, this is for the VNet 1 VM. I'm able to connect. All right, so I'll go back to the Azure portal again, and I will try to connect to the another machine as well. So though I connected my point-to-set VPN, if you noticed correctly, right? My point-to-set VPN is connected to the east-west VHub, right? Which means I should only connect to the east-west VNet example, right? But I am also able to connect to the VM, which is in a different network and different VHub, but they all connect to the one VNet, VWAN. So now I'm going to connect to one of the machine, which is in a Europe location. Okay, I'm going to show you this. This is second machine, which is in West Europe location, and this VNet is paired with the VWAN of West Europe. Okay, I'm going to copy this IP address and try to connect to the virtual machine. Okay, 1.4, 1.0.4, and you see I'm able to connect. So Azure user, and I'm able to connect. All right, so this is one thing. And what we will do is we'll also do one more testing here. Okay, the test would be, now I'm able to connect to one of the machine, right? Let's say VNet VM2, right? From this machine, I'm going to connect to this machine. All right, let's see. I'm into the VNet VM2, which is in West Europe, and I'm going to connect to the VM, which is in Central US location. We'll see if this is gonna be working fine or not. So what is the IP address of the Central India mission? 10.2.3.4. Okay, I am connected to the VNet to VM. From that machine, I'm trying to connect to the another machine here. So let me see. I've chosen very basic configuration for my virtual machine like CPU and RAM, because you see, to set up this VWAN and VPN gateways, it actually consumes more resources. Whatever the free trial Microsoft is giving may not be sufficient. So that's why I've just chosen the very basic VM configuration. That's the reason the VMs are very slow. I would say dead slow. So it's trying to connect to the VM and it's connecting. Okay. So this is how you set up the virtual WAN, and how you set up the point to set VPN from your system to the cloud environment, how we connect it, and how we establish a connectivity between the on-prem to Azure and within the Azure, right? So that's a whole concept which we're able to test it and we're able to implement it. All right. I hope this is really helpful, and based on this, okay, let me just summarize, right? I mean, you learned many things here now. What you are going to do if you're an Azure administrator, what is your role here, right? And what kind of questions you get in the interview, right? If I talk about that, right? As I said earlier, this is the setup has to be configured most of the times, most of the organizations in the initial design, right? So when you plan to move to the cloud, you're going to have such kind of architecture defined, and in the initial setup, somebody has to implement it. Let's say that somebody, if you are the one who is part of the cloud team already, and they are asking you to implement it, you can go ahead and implement it, but you are not the one who is going to take a decision on what should be the vhub configuration, right? Like what should be the vhub address space, and what should be the routing preference. You can give your advice, your suggestion, but you may not be able to take the decision also, right? There will be a network engineers, network administrators, and maybe network architects, application architects. So many stakeholders here, cloud solution architects. So they will be involved, and the combined effort, we will all decide what will be our future growth, how we want to, how we are going to expand our network largely. So based on them, they are going to design the solution, and based on that, you are going to create a vhub. Creating a vhub is very simple. Setting up this environment is very simple when you have all the values in place. Okay, so that's like configuration. Somebody will give you the configuration, you are going to implement it. And if they're not giving you, you might participate in the conversation saying, okay, let's create a vhub based on the region, let's add so and so vnets. You might be participating in the conversation, but you may not be able to take the decision to implement it. Okay, so that's about the initial configuration. And so to participate in the configuration, maybe at least, right, Somebody's talking about the virtual hub, somebody's talking about the routing preferences. You should have some clarity, right? That's the reason you need to know what process we have to follow, what is the step that we are following, what options we have, right? When we are configuring or when we are setting up this kind of environment. So this explanation, what we discussed so far, is going to give such level of confidence, right? When you do this end-to-end lab, okay, you know what options you have and what is the end goal of this entire component, right? So that's the important thing that you should be aware of it. Even when you go for an interview, the technical panel who is assessing your skills is going to look in those aspects. Okay, so they'll ask you, okay, did you work on virtual WAN? Then you say, yes, we do have virtual WAN, but you may not say you worked on it, right? You have to say, yes, we have a virtual WAN, and sometimes we get a request to create a virtual hub, or sometimes we get a request to add existing virtual network to the virtual WANs, virtual hubs. Probably, there's a new network, virtual network that is being created, and you have to associate it. Maybe you can say we spin up the new VNet, for the new customers, and we add those VNet to the VHubs, or maybe create a new VHub and add them. Sometimes I get a request to modify the routing information, and though the routing information will be given by the firewall administrator, I'm just going to modify the existing routing, or create a new routing table, right? Such kind of things you're going to talk, right? And they might say, how do you secure your Azure virtual networks, and how do you secure your virtual WANs? You might say that we can integrate this with the, we can integrate with this Azure firewall or Azure virtual plans, as you can create of Azure firewall policies, which can be incorporated in a globally, right? Such kind of things you're going to say. And you can say we have a communication connectivity from on-premises to Azure. We have a site-to-site VPN, and most of our users connect from who goes to corporate office. They connect through site-to-site VPN. Though I did not set up because it's already there when it was built initially. So I'm going to manage it in case if there is a user says they're not able to connect. I might have to look into them, but otherwise, not many changes I make on the site-to-site VPN, because small changes might impact global users or global applications. So it's really, you don't deal with them, okay, unless you are a network expert or network architect, right? So that's what you can say. And point to set VPNs, yes, sometimes I do because I get a request to do it. And for new customers, I might have to implement the new point to set VPN. I just follow so and so steps with the open VPN tunnel and Azure AD authentication. I do set up it, and I do ensure that the users are able to connect if there isn't with the no issues. So you can explain this, and this is what you have to grasp it from this whole concept, right? So this is about how the cloud environment is being set up, how they can talk to each other, how you can secure the communication, how you can route the traffic between the multiple cloud environments. Okay, so with this, I would say we are done with the virtual WANs and connectivity methods on the cloud environment. Okay, so the next session, what we will do is we'll talk about the Azure backup. Then we'll go for the Azure site recovery, which is a DR solution. Then once it is completed, we will be talking about the Azure monitoring for your virtual machines, and how do you perform the patching for your virtual machines. And later we will see if there are a couple of options to automate the Azure VM operations. We'll talk about them. Then once it is completed, we'll talk about the Azure storage accounts, and how do you integrate the storage account with the VNets, private endpoints. Then once it is completed, then what we do is we'll talk about the PaaS components as well. So we'll go on further, right? As in when we go, we'll get some more clarity about the Azure services. So yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to let me know. Thanks, everyone.